Hello, ladies. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the Manse and to Homemakers Radio. I'm Mrs. Sherman, and I hope that you will click the description on the link below and go to the post where I have placed this video and see the other pictures and comments that I make there. And you can also leave a comment there. I don't have comments on the channel. Now, before you go, I want to show you my teacup, and it's from Stetchcall Gracie Bone China. You can get these at any seconds shop such as a reject store or a place like Ross, Home Goods, Marshalls, TJ Maxx for as little as $5.99. And this one has a beautiful bluish bird on it. One of my favorite cups to use all day long. And I've recently discovered a strawberry tea that my daughter bought it for me for my birthday. So I'll just slip over here and get it. It's by Clipper. And even if you don't like the taste, just to brew it in the cup or in a teapot, it just puts a fragrance in the room that just lifts you immediately, and it's so natural. And so, ladies, today I am going to just encourage you to get dressed up and do something, take care of your face and your hair, and also remember that if you cannot seem to get started in your home, perhaps you just need to go and start over, get a shower, get dressed, and just have a brand new day. I used to do this with my children. If they got a little fussy or a little discouraged, I'd say, would you like to when they were little, you'd like to take a bath, and they'd put clean clothes on, and then life just kind of started over again. And so I would just encourage you to take care of yourself first, because even if you are not sure what you're going to be able to do today, at least you will feel ready and dressed for something. And home is the most important place right now. And I hope that this situation with captivity has encouraged a lot of people to regard the home in a much different light than they did before. Those of you who have not been full-time homemakers or have spent their life having their schedule planned out by a company or a school or an education facility so that you knew what time to get up and where you were going, are going to find it difficult because you've never had to do it yourself. But the self-motivation that you need to learn is going to be a challenge. You have to learn what to do first thing in the morning. And for the most part, for homemaking, I will have to tell you that you're going to have to see what happens. And then you determine what is needed. For instance, you get up in the morning and you realize people need to be fed, or they have to have clean clothes, or you need to use some of the facilities and you'd appreciate having a clean kitchen and a clean bathroom. Well, that's where your work is set out for you. And if you ever ask, what am I supposed to do at home all day? Just wake up in the morning and start observing what needs to be done. And you will see that your work is laid out for you. It's cut out for you. Now, being home enables you to rest between tasks. You know, when you're in a business, they might give you a couple of breaks. But being home means that it's really more healthful and more mind-building, because after you've done something, you can sit down and catch up on your mail or read something. And the ladies of the olden days used to do that. I recently have started to do things in increments. It's planting time here and weeding time, and it's time to clean up the back patio and the front. And so I decided, instead of waiting for that perfect day where I had a whole day before me and I wouldn't have to prepare meals and I wouldn't have to do laundry, which I waited and it never came. I decided to do things in increments. So I went out and I just did this much of pulling grass and weeding and planting, just this much. And in a week I had it finished. And yet I had sat there for several months waiting for the perfect day to go and clean up that back area or the front. And I found out if I wrote down on my list to spend 15 minutes outside doing something in the flower beds or in the front yard, that I could actually get it done a lot better. And I've been doing the same thing with going through books and archives. Just do 20 minutes is better than not to do it all, trying to wait for the perfect day. And so I have, and also that's what we do, isn't it, with our exercises? We spend 5 minutes on an exercise and 5 more minutes on something else, maybe a Bible reading, or 5 minutes on correspondence, or 10 minutes on writing a letter, just a card. And I found that if I wait for that day, that my correspondence day, I'm going to write all these fantastic letters and send out these cards, it never comes. But I discovered if I could just get one letter, one card, one thank you note out in the mailbox, the tension goes away. If every time you look at a pile of things that you need to sort through, or you need to fold, or something that needs to be cleaned out, and you feel the tension, your breathing stops. A lot of people think that anxiety is something that they have anxiety, when in actual fact it might be your posture or your breathing, which constricts when you see something that needs to be done that you can't get at, or the pressure of not being able to go through it. Just spend 5 minutes on it and see if that pressure goes away and if you breathe a little better. And a lot of people analyze things as anxiety when it could be just you stop breathing when there's a problem. And it could be even when someone says something to you that's negative, you constrict your breathing. And so perhaps you could get online and look for things about breathing and maybe breathing exercises, and notice your children if they hold their breath a lot, and that could be tension. And you too. And so that's my little discovery. Also, remember that anything I say is just my own opinion, and you don't have to do everything just because I do it. Every family is different. Every home is different. You all have different needs, and you don't have to do the things that I do. I'm just sharing some of my opinions. And so being home, let's get back to being home. Being home protects you from first of all, it enables you to rest between tasks. I was listening to some fitness gurus talk about that, and he said that you have to recover from your workout. You have to rest. And I thought to myself, I bet that would work a lot with homemaking. And instinctively, the women of old knew this, because after they had done one thing, they'd sit down in their chair and do some knitting, or just catch up on something else. And so I wanted to share that with you. And then the next thing that I thought about was that home protects you from demands on your time, unreasonable demands on your time from other people. It used to be a common factor that people who stayed home they caught the eye of people who were very busy and couldn't stay home, and they wanted them to pick their children up from school, or they wanted to bring something by for them to mend, and of course, they were willing to pay. But when you're home, you can easily say, well, my family comes first and my schedule's just too big. And you can also be so busy with your children, especially if you're homeschooling them, and it will reduce the demands on your time from outside. But I can remember when people thought that the homemaker could go and maybe be a place for their children to come before they got home from work. And I guess they used to call them latchkey children, but and really no harm was done, but the homemaker has a lot of vulnerability, and people can impose on her time. They'll also want to call and ask for some kind of intelligence or household advice on something that they could probably look up. How to fix something, how to do something, they could probably look it up and figure it out. And the beauty of having the internet is this, and that is that we don't have to talk so much and ask so many questions and put burdens on other people. We can look it up, and if we can't find it, then we can go to someone. But it's a quieter world that way, and less imposition on other people, constantly asking them how something is done or where to find something. And you can, or where to find something, like if you want to purchase it, or if you need a service or some kind of product, you can look all this up. And that's the beauty of the web, is we can be a little quieter and a little less demanding on other people's time. So the homemaker, it enables you to rest between tasks. It protects you from demands on your time by other people. And that's not to say that we don't have our favorites and our good friends that we would stop and drop and everything and do for them. But it is one thing you have to be very careful of, and especially if you're in a church, because sometimes people in a church think that because you're a Christian and you're a church member, that your time is just open and available for everyone. They call at the drop of a hat. And this can dig into your time with your children and with your family and with your home. If you see yourself getting more and more bogged down, further and further behind on everything, things piling up, the laundry, the dishes, things that need to be done. Perhaps there's just too much outside stuff going on. Even if you're confined to the home, you can be involved with too many things that are not directly related to your comforts of the home. And then being at home gives you time to think about your purpose, and to think about the homemakers before us, the people. I live in an old house, and it's always intriguing to think of which part of the house the original lady sat in the morning when she had her tea, or what did she see out the window, and how did she feel about the day. And if you live in a place that's more historical, it's always interesting to think of the women before us who had gardens or who were caring for their families at home. And it also, being home is good for your mind if you will use the time to develop your skills and your purpose. And also, I have encouraged you to take a course in something. Give yourself a course in something. Now, all of us are used to going out and signing up for some kind of class, and we'll go somewhere else to learn something, or to take a class in art or knitting or sewing. And now we can learn about these things ourselves if we will get a book and create a course out of it and take yourself through it. And one of the books I suggested, which is pretty hard to get, people are not finding this book, but there are books called Cottage Core online you can get, and all they are is craft and recipes and wholesome living. And basically, I believe it came from days gone by, things that will always be in style, and has all these different things. This one was divided up into the seasons, and then after each chapter on a season also had a part on crafting or creating, and the other was doing things. One of the most helpful things I think someone pointed me to was the Fly Lady schedule on her website. And I thought for a long time, I can't do Fly Lady, because she's got the living room and the bedroom, and she's got her zones for the week, and I have a couple of rooms that I can barely get into, and I've got to get some storage things moved around, and I can't really do that. And then someone told me that they had been online looking at trying to follow the zones and the schedules, and she said what happens is, if you don't get everything done in the living room that week, it's going to come up in another month or two, and then you can continue. And so I was heartened by that if you don't get anything, and I remember in the beginning, it was called Sidetracked Home Executives, and we had a little card file, and we learned to take, if it said clean living room, you'd do what you could, and then you'd stick it back into the next week, behind next week, one of the days of the week, and then it would come up again, and you could finish, and so that you didn't feel overwhelmed. And for some reason, I didn't want to do any of it because there were a couple of rooms I was having a problem with, and I needed to get them organized so that I could actually do the work. But so take anything that you have. Maybe you have a cookbook. A new cookbook's always a delight, isn't it? Because you get to see things in different pictures, and it's invigorating. But what about taking something like that and doing everything, trying to go through it recipe by recipe? One of my children gave me a wonderful cookbook, and I have been enjoying myself so much because I had all the different meals, all the different kinds of things. And of course, it's divided up into salads and soups and main dishes. And I have been enjoying trying out all those recipes. And I've learned to, of course, cut them in half or a fourth if there's only me and my husband here, and using it as a course. And that's why I'm saying, if you probably have books that you could look at it in a different way and use it as a course. Maybe you ordered a book that had it was for a season, and it was a particular season. It was spring or it was autumn, and it had the recipes, and it had decor, and it had crafts, and it had activities and things to do to improve your body and mind. And just take that and make a course out of it. And especially if you're living alone, I think it's really important to put yourself in a course, in a class. And that way we all become more self-motivated and independent, and we're not dependent on what goes on out there to supply us with our knowledge, and also to supply us with our desire to take a course. So also, homemaking is good for your mind and good for your body if you do it right. It's like I said before, you can, as I talked about previously, you can go to some exercise course online in the video in YouTube, and find someone that's going to give a 5-minute exercise, a 5-minute beginner exercise. And you can do that. And then, or you could be vigorously cleaning house, but then you can go and sit down and recover from it and read a little bit. And so home is good for your mind and good for your body. You're free from the pollution out there. You're free from the inhumaneness and lack of real communication, and just the shallow associations you get from being in the public with people you don't know. And you can also guard and guide your home a little bit better, because you don't have so much coming in from out in the world. Now, if you're busy at home, and you're busy guarding and guiding the home, and you're busy, trying to keep up with everything, then and you still have a lot of anxiety from the media, or it's, even if you don't watch it or listen to it, it still worries you, then what I would suggest is that your mind is not full enough. And I remember the train trip we took. And I had all the family here, all the descendants here, and we had turned our home into a train. Our activities, we had an itinerary in it. We had so many things to do that we didn't even think about the world. And I got to kind of musing on that a little bit, and decided that if my mind is still got a little room in it to worry, then I need to fill that space up with something else. And it is possible that you could have more to do and put yourself through the course. And the minute you start thinking, this is the way women of old were. In the olden days, I noticed the older women, they didn't allow things to dwell in their mind for too long. They would get busy. They would do something. And they didn't have the meltdowns and the feeling that they couldn't cope. You couldn't melt them down. I mean, they had worse problems than we have. They went through actual world wars, and which of course we're going through a war. And I didn't want to mention this, but you can learn a lot from them because they didn't have meltdowns. If you feel like you are not able to cope, then what you need to do is something. Just move. Go for a walk. Move around the house. Pick up something in the house and move it around. Clean something in the house. It's very, very good for your mind. I'll be sitting here sometimes and I'll just let my mind lie fallow, and I'll look around and then I'll think, I need to wash those curtains. Or I really could make that over there look better, and I see that probably I need to do some food preparation, or I need to check the fridge and make sure everything's fresh and clean in there. And so if you do have time for anxiety, for any kind of anxiety of things that are going on out there or even in your life, it's possible that you could alleviate it by creating a list and following that list, or doing 5 minutes of things that seem to be overwhelming. Just do 5 minutes of it, or create a course out of something so that you would have something to look forward to. Now, I noticed in the Bible, in some of the studying that I've done, that the word house, home, family, and marriage were interchangeable. I mean, they were interactive and interchangeable. For example, when it said the house of someone, it meant their family. It didn't mean the literal house. Just like there's other words that they use that are like tangible. A house actually meant the people in it and the family. So when the Bible says that the women are to guide the home, house and home and family and marriage were all in there, all interchangeable. And so when it said to guide the home, it just meant also to be a good steward of the possessions, but also of the family and of the people there, to guide and guard them. We often guard our husbands from people imposing too much on their time. And how many of you have a skilled husband who knows how to do something, and people want him to do it for free, or to take tremendous amount of time, or we kind of guard them. We guard them from it, and we guard our children from being imposed upon too. So you have to guard and guide the house, the home, the family, and the marriage, and that's our job. So think of your home as an ark. We used to play Noah's Ark, when it rained with the children, and because they couldn't go outside, but they could go out on the deck, on the porch, where they were protected. And if you think of your home as an ark, and it's safe from the world's impositions, and you also have to guard it from the things that come over the airwaves, your radio, your television. I don't have a television, but everybody has the internet, and you have to guard your family from too much negative news, because it can cause depression. What the negative news does is that it convinces people that they're not worthwhile, that they don't have a strong sense of themselves or their families. And the trouble with it is it dilutes the home, it dilutes the family, and makes us focus on other people and things that are out there. And so your family is given to you by God, and you have to guard it and guide it. And where your children came from, you, your husband, the grandparents on up, they need to have a strong sense of their purpose and why they were brought into this world, and how God has a purpose for them, and that they can live their full potential and have a strong feeling of worth. You're not going to get that listening to the media. So if you still have time to hear the media and to get upset about it, then you need to fill your life with more to do that will progress you in your home. So do something every day that you enjoy, that relaxes you, that is not housework, or maybe is housework, but something that you enjoy. Do something every day that you enjoy, that relaxes you. And one of the problems we have to guard against is taking our leisure and making work out of it. How many times have you been sitting there doing some little thing, maybe making cards or enjoying some kind of paper craft or knitting or just anything, and somebody will say, or maybe you'll think it yourself, you should make 10 of these and sell them. and then pretty soon it's not leisure anymore. It's work, and it's lost its allure, and it's lost its relaxation. So that's one problem, is we often make work out of our leisure. Another thing is that you need to find out about is that everybody has bad moments at home. Everybody has a bad day. And just because you have sometimes things that are disappointing that happen that are unhappy does not mean that it has ruined the day or ruined your life. Because one thing we have to learn when we're very young is that life is part good and part bad. And when bad things happen, this is when character kicks in. This is when you have the opportunity to use your character, to use your resolve. And I mentioned several things that character consists of. And I've quoted about 3 verses that have lists in them. And one of them was Philippians 4:8, good, lovely, pure, noble, of good report. And then Galatians 5:22, love, joy, peace, goodness, kindness. And then is it 2 Peter 1, verse 5-8, and it's add to your faith virtue, and to your virtue knowledge, and then I believe the word character is mentioned in there. But all these things are your responses, if you can learn them. All these things are your responses to the troubles and the problems that happen during the day. A child may have a bad, quote, bad day or a bad experience and just want to give up because the day is ruined. And they wake up in the morning wanting to have a perfect day. But it's still a perfect day in God's eyes, because He planned for some of these challenges to develop our character. So today I'm going to homeschool you a little bit, and I'm in McGuffey's third eclectic reader. Eclectic means a variety of things. That means it's just got a selection of history, poetry, reading, grammar, and character. It's mostly about character. And this is the Christian School edition. Now, I'm not recommending that you go ahead and order these things. They are written in a very archaic way because they were written in 1837 and on then. They were revised year after year for the schools, but these were schools that were not so controlled by the government. These were probably, a lot of them, just your local little community school in which the parents took turns teaching. So I mentioned before about this called castle building. And it's about a boy who was building a castle out of blocks. And we did a play on this when I had turned my home into an inn or a train or something. I'm getting lost now. I've turned it into so many different things. But we enjoyed this play. We turned it into a play. We made a script. We got props. And we gave everyone a role. And it's about a boy who was building a castle. And he looks like he's about 8 or 9 years old. And the cat walked through and knocked the castle down. And it just broke him down. He just cried and cried. And so his brother said, I'll read it to you. And then I'll read the second part to you, because I wanted to teach you something about it. And So after he got upset about the blocks, and he just kind of had a meltdown because these blocks were crashed and he had built this beautiful castle. Well, how many times have you been in the kitchen and everything's going well and something slips off the edge of something and drops, and you've destroyed a whole thing that you have made for your family to eat, and how that can crush you, especially if you don't have much money and you've destroyed something they were looking forward to. And so I want to read after he has his little cry here after the cat knocks down his castle, and we'll see if we can develop some lessons from it about character. What a baby, said his brother Joe, who was reading on the sofa. Crying over spilled milk does no good. Build it up again. Now remember that phrase, build it up again. Remember in Proverbs where the spider, though his home is knocked down several times, he just builds it up again. And that was used as an example in the Proverbs. No, I won't, said Herbert, and he went on crying. What's all the trouble here? Explained Papa as he opened the door and came in. The cat just rubbed against Herbert's castle and it fell down, answered Hetty, his sister. But she didn't mean to do it, and she didn't know it would fall, did she, Papa? Why, no, and is this what the trouble is? Herbert, said his papa, and held out his hands. Come to me. The little boy got up from the floor and came slowly, his eyes full of tears, and stood by his father. There is a better way than this, my boy, said Papa. If you had taken that way, your heart would have been light already. I should have heard you singing over your blocks instead of crying. Shall I show you the way? Herbert nodded his head, and his papa sat on the floor by the pile of blocks with his little son by his side and began to lay the foundation of the new castle. Now, there are several things going on here that I noticed that maybe even the people at the time that read this might not have noticed, but the father had to show the child why it was wrong and show him a better way. And too many times I think we think that our children are going to learn because they're going to get so shocked from the parents reacting to some kind of disappointment the child has, and how the child just kind of flops around and gives up, and the parents scold them and then take the toys away and send them off to do something else. But what about doing what this papa did and taking him under your wing and sitting down with him and rebuilding or redoing it and giving them the love and the motivation, and then instead of the harshness? I have thought about that a lot. And then so here's the next story that comes up, and it's the conclusion of castle building. And of course there are words here you have to write and learn. String, paper, eagerly, dashed, ease, dishes, retorted, sentence, and tray. And the first one had words like anger, castle, foundation, rattling, tower, dismay, sofa, interested, passion, pile, nodded, exclaimed, already, and spilled. So this is the third McGuffey reader, but it does not mean third grade, because they were just to distinguish one from another. For example, you might have a child that is much older that would read this book. It doesn't mean it's third grade. It's just the third book. And so you would put your child in the one that works best for him, and don't worry about the grades. And that's one thing I'm going to tell you as I teach you, is don't get hung up on what grade you're in. Get hung up on what you know and what you can learn. And it doesn't matter. I used to take the homeschool books and I'd go back clear to the 6th grade and learn something from that and teach much older children out of the 6th grade book, because it had information in it that we didn't know. There's no way that you can learn everything from those books in 1 year in the grade. So we mixed them all up, and if they advanced a little further in history, we'd go ahead and order them a 12th grade book. But if they were still struggling with math, we'd stay in the 6th grade book, and we would pull in even this third McGuffey reader. That's a great reader for for children who are in 5th and 6th grade. So we mixed our curriculum up. It didn't matter what grade they were in. And so, you know where they are, and you know where you are. So I'm going to read to you the conclusion of castle building. Soon Herbert was as much interested in castle building as he had been a little while before. He began to sing over his work, and all his trouble was gone. "This is a great deal better than crying, isn't it?" said Papa. "Crying for what?" asked Herbert, forgetting his grief for a few minutes. "Because the cat knocked your castle over." "Oh!" A shadow flitted across his face. Now, isn't this what children do? When you remind them of something and they've already forgotten, and then you give them another detail, and that helps their memory. Sometimes we have to help them with their memory. A shadow flitted across his face, but was gone in a moment, and he was on building as eagerly as ever. "I told him not to cry over spilt milk," said Joe, his brother, looking down from his place on the sofa. "I wonder if you didn't cry when your kite spring broke," retorted Herbert. Now, Herbert's the one that cried because his castle was knocked over. And his brother said, now here's a lesson going on for the brother. "Losing a kite is quite another thing," answered Joe, a little dashed. "The kite was gone forever, but your blocks were as good as before, and you had only to rebuild." "Well," said Papa, "I don't see that crying was any more use in your case than in Herbert's. Sticks and paper are easily found, and you had only to go to work and make another kite. You see, this brother Joe had one time cried over a kite that was lost or broken up in the trees, and he said, well, that was different. The kite was gone forever. But the father said, there's really no difference because sticks and paper are easily found. This is when we used to, remember that in the olden days, we used to make our own kites? And you only had to go to work and make another kite. Joe looked down at his book and went on reading. By this time, the castle was finished. "It is ever so much nicer than the one the cat knocked down," said Hetty, and so thought Herbert as he looked at it proudly from all sides. "If the cat knocks that one down, I'll—" "Build it up again," said Papa, finishing the sentence for his little boy. "But, Papa, the cat must not knock my castles down. I can't have it," spoke out Herbert, knitting his forehead. "You must watch her then. This is a great lesson coming up here for all of us. You must watch her then. Little boys, as well as grown-up people, have to be often on their guard. You know, we all have to be alert. We can't just go through life like a fatalist. I talked about fatalism and just saying, well, things happen. What will be, will be. And we have to be alert, and we have to be responsible. I remember one time I was thinking about putting a little pond with a pump and, in my garden, and I said I probably changed my mind on it because I don't want I have a lot of company and from the church and everything. I don't want some little kid wandering in it when I'm not looking and maybe falling in and can't get out again. And I know about children, they're head heavy and they can fall in a little tiny bit of water, that much water, and drown in it because they can't lift themselves out. A 2-year-old and younger are very top heavy. And so I said, no, I won't do that because I don't want to risk, somebody's child walking into it and falling. And the person said to me, well, it wouldn't be your fault if they died. You see, this is a terrible attitude because we want to be responsible. And yes, it might not be our fault, but we have to be responsible. And we don't want to have that on our conscience. And so anything that could cause an accident or cause someone else to stumble, it's the same thing with the moral life. If you're the Bible talks about this, if something you're doing causes someone else to stumble or plays on a weakness that they have, and you could shrug your shoulder and say, well, it wasn't my fault, I wasn't guilty. You really are, because we're not supposed to cause other people to stumble, and we have to be alert and aware of it. So here's the conclusion to this story here. Little boys as well as the grown-up people have to be often on their guard. That's what I call alertness. If you go into the street, you have to look out for the carriages. You can see how old this book is. If you go out into the street, you have to look out for the carriages so as not to be run over. And you will have to keep out of people's way. In the house, if you go about heedlessly, that was one of the words they have to study, heedlessly. If you go about heedlessly, you will be very apt to run against someone. I have seen a careless child dash suddenly into the room just as a servant was leaving it with a tray of dishes in her hands, and a crash followed. You can tell how old this was. It has a picture of a lady with some dishes there, and the child's run into her, hasn't been watching. "Oh, it was I, wasn't it?" said Hetty, the sister. "Yes, I believe it was, and I hope it will never happen again." Papa now left the room, saying, "I don't want any more of this crying over spilled milk, as Joe says. If your castles get knocked down, build them up again." And there were other stories about this, but this is part of character, too. Now, I will give you an example of my own situation, is that someone came over to check the gutters of my house, and there's some dry rot going on around these old houses, you know. You need the beams replaced and stuff. And so he decided that he would replace some things and repair some things. And he dug up the front garden, trying to get a pipe out, an old pipe out. And it's a mess. But I will rebuild again. And I could kind of go in my room and pout because I really got that lovely garden going good right outside the front window and in front of the house, and it's kind of threatens me, but I'm going to build it up again. And so now I'd like to talk to you about fear and frustration in the home. This is where you're going to learn the most. You know, if you start homeschooling your children, one of the things you do is you learn most about yourself. You learn, and also they learn too. You know, if you're ever gone on a diet, or you just want to stop eating so much sugar or something like that, and that child is going to notice how many times you go get a pop or a soft drink, a fizzy drink, and they're going to notice every time you go and get yourself a bowl of ice cream, and they're going to see your habits. And that's why I think homeschooling is best for the parents, because it builds character in the parents. And now every move you make will be watched. And that's why it's so important to teach by what you do. Start your day out getting ready. Start your day out getting dressed and good grooming, because that's what they're going to notice and they're going to follow. And if you have reluctant followers, then your example is going to carry far more weight than words. So you get dressed up and you say, "I got dressed up for you, and I put a little bit of scent on, and I brushed my teeth, and I have good breath. It's all for you." And your example is going to be watched, and who you are talking to on the phone, and how much time you spend communicating with other people that are not part of your children's lives. This is really important. In the olden days, when we had the old-fashioned phone with the cord on it, and we didn't have the message machines, women would get stuck talking to someone who called, and just out of politeness stay on the phone, and the children would get anxious, and they'd get hungry, and they'd want something, and you could hear them, screaming in the background if you were the one that called. And there didn't seem to be any way of regulating this for these poor women at home. But the children notice when she's talking to someone that doesn't have any bearing on them. And another thing we need to learn to do is how to speak to the grandparents so that it has some intelligence in it. I've seen grandparents will call and they'll want to talk to their grandchildren, but the children don't have anything to say because they don't have their minds aren't full. So that's why the beautiful thing about homeschooling is now the children can communicate more with people of all ages. And I noticed one of mine had read in the third reader about how corn was planted in in colonial America and wanted to talk to me about it. So Mr. S went out immediately and got some corn seeds, and we were fixing up a place where this boy can plant some corn when he comes to see us. So here we are interacting, and we're involved. It has meaning to both of us. So many times with children, the grandparents find it hard to really talk to them because what they're interested in doesn't have a meaning. Maybe they're more into modern toys and modern games and things. And when you homeschool them, you can involve all different generations, and so that they can communicate with many different age groups. So now one thing that I learned also is that frustration isn't of any value, and unless you're going to use it like this boy did to teach him to rebuild, to build it up again. And even in a home where there's been some threat against your family, that maybe someone in the family or some extended relative thinks that you're no good, or you're not doing a good job, they can debilitate you pretty bad if you allow that to get into your mind. And fear and frustration that you're going to lose something, and that you're not being used, or that you have a life of value, can debilitate your whole home. And when you have fear, and that's why I'm warning you about, as a homemaker, to not pay attention to the news. I remembered in the olden days where you didn't really hear any news on a daily basis. No, once in a while you would notice something on a newspaper, but we didn't all get the newspaper. But it wasn't such a big part of our lives. What was going on, who was building a house, and what what the industry was and what was needed, and that sort of thing was more important. But now, because of the media and other things too, you can even have no media at all, and you have these bad news bears that come in, and maybe you have even Christian friends that just want to. I had to ask someone the other day to be a little more positive and uplifting, and they assured me they were positive. They were absolutely positive that nothing could be done. Nothing good was going to happen. They were positive about that. But fear is one of the tools of the enemy, because if you have fear, your chest is going to get tight, and you're going to stop breathing, and you're not going to feel life in your mind. And so fear uses energy. It uses all your energy. You can't get anything done. You have to go back to bed and get some sleep, because the fear just uses up everything. And it creates bad judgment. And it makes you use all your mental energy and puts you in a sense of panic, so that you can't reason. You can't reason with anyone. You have a temper tantrum. It causes fear, just triggers so many things. And pretty soon you're not accomplishing anything. So also, this story is so sweet. It taught me that you can learn to turn a bad situation into something good, maybe even better than. Have you ever maybe had a headache and had to you just weren't feeling well, and you had to go to bed, and then after a good sleep, and you slept it off, and you felt so much better. You felt better than before you got sick. Well, this is what you can do, is turn a bad situation into something better than it was before it was a bad situation. And so, ladies, if you feel that you need a coach, what you need to do is go to those scriptures that I mentioned, Philippians 4:8, Galatians 5:22 and 23, and I believe it's 2 Peter 1, chapter 1, verses 5 through 8, but might be 1 Peter. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I've been a preacher's wife all these years, and sometimes I can't remember all that. So if you feel you need a coach, here's how you coach yourself. And I think it's really important to be self-motivated. You look at the Bible and all the people that were alone, and look at the Apostle Paul alone in prison, and how he used that as a motivation, and all the captives of the Bible, and how they were alone, but they used it as motivation. You can turn a bad situation into something better, and you can make a course for yourself to follow and say, oh, well, I'm alone, but I'm going to fix this and do this. I'm going to communicate with this person or write to this person. And you create a coach out of yourself. We've talked about these life coaches, and they're making a lot of headway into society, and you can buy books on life coaching and learn to be a life coach. But you can be your own life coach. You life coach your children and your family. That's what 1 Timothy, I believe it's 5. No. It's Titus 2, where it says, guide and guard the home. That's just nothing more than coaching your family. And so coach yourself too. Find something that you already have, or make a list of things, not necessarily things to do, but things you need to appreciate, mingled in with there. Things you need to appreciate, and things you need to think about, and be your own life coach. That's what I like about the many books that I have, is I can use those. And I'm going through this one and just really enjoying it. And rather than just reading it, I've got to read it now, I'm on chapter 2, and this is so tedious. I'll take each one and think, okay, I could use that story. I could use it for something. Maybe I could just write my own story. Oh, and speaking of stories, okay, so you all knew about Miss Lily of the Valley and how she had been sending me these stories. She's a famous pioneer story writer, and she's on the Pioneer bestseller list. And she's written a story called Pioneer Ribbons. And every now and then a little episode comes out, and I'll read it to you. And so Allison, I've discovered the purpose of Allison, and that is, it's a story of character. And that when and I've got this on good information from this author, that the purpose of the story is to show Allison using her inner knowledge and strength and developing new knowledge as she goes along the Oregon Trail and comes into Oregon, where things are going to be very challenging. And so the purpose of the story is not to show how she manages to help her parents in their endeavor to have a home in Oregon, and to build a house, and to have a garden, and to have a business, and to develop friendships and a society around them, but to show how they react to things that don't go well. And one of the things that's going to happen is that she's going to get to their land and find out that somebody else is squatting on it. And what are they going to do about that? And then find out that the house that was supposed to be there was not there, and it was actually a chicken coop, and all these different things. So I want to also tell you one more thing, and that is about the person is coming down the driveway that's going to make a lot of noise in that garden and fixing those gutters. So I want to quickly tell you one more thing, and that is the person that has a bad attitude, but other people are taking life in stride, feels that the one that is calm and is wanting to have peace in their life is divisive because they don't agree with them. Have you run into this? I have. Someone who has wrong information, let's say about a certain medical procedure or something, or so-called, some kind of medicine or something that they want everyone to take, and you have got some knowledge about it, and you don't want it. You don't want it for your family, and they're part of the family, or they're an extended relative, and they will say you're divisive. And that is a weasel word. That's a distraction word, because the problem is not division. The problem is truth and error. So this is the way that they cover up their error, is they say you're divisive because you don't agree with them in their error. So don't be caught with that. And ladies, I hope you have a lovely day, and I hope that this has given you time to do a few more things. So I'll talk to you later. Bye.